A very good evening to everyone. On behalf of the Solve Foundation, I extend a warm welcome to everyone attending today's journey to the safety webinar series on the subject importance of vehicle recall towards road safety. Let me begin today's session by providing a quick overview of the Indian Road Safety Campaign, after which I will turn the session to Mr. Krishnakant Kulari. I request all participants to post their questions in the chat box, which will be taken at the end. Indian Road Safety Campaign is the initiative of the Sol Foundation working towards making the road safer in India. Started as a project at IIT Delhi due to the death of the students in a road accident. IRSC has gradually grown to be the largest youth-led organizations in India. IRSC has been working in close associations with the organizations such as UN, WHO, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, various state governments, and other research centers across the world in its endeavor towards Vision Zero. To achieve this, IRSC has worked with the 1,500 colleges and 25,000 volunteers across 50 plus cities in India in various domains such as awareness, technical innovation, law, order, policy, medical, etc. Indian Road Safety Campaign had launched the Journey to the Safety webinar to bring the stakeholders of road safety in one platform where we try to spread awareness about the importance of the road safety and the protocols then what needs to ensure. Now, allow me to introduce the speaker of the day, Mr. Krishnakant Kolari, currently working as a systems engineer at Volvo Group. He completed his bachelor's in electronics and communication engineering from Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University in 2009. Started her career with Bosch in engine management system and worked with many original equipment manufacturers across Europe, Latin America, Asia, associated with commercial and marine a little while for a decade. Mr. Giri Kumar Kumaresh will be moderating today's webinar. He is a senior architect working on Accident Research India and ASEAN project topics at Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions Private Limited, India. He has nearly 12 years of experience in advanced vehicle safety engineering and research. He serves as a technical advisor for all the automatic safety related topics with Bosch, published nearly 40 plus research papers and journals in leading journals like IEEE, SAE, and own many patents. He is the key representative in CMVRC in India, and he represents Bosch in various technical standing committee in Ministry of Road Transport for policy, legislation, regulation formations. Let me move on to the today's presentation. I hope everyone can see my screen. So moving on to today's presentation. So these are the topics that we will be covering in the webinar, and these will be the agendas. So first we will be talking about the overview of the modern vehicles, how the electronic vehicles are replacing the diesel and petrol engines, the electronics and its role in the modern engines. The third topic would be combustion engines, and in this we will talk about how the combustion engines can be replaced and what are the effects of the combustion engine that we have to tackle about. Coming onwards to the overview of the engine controls and emissions, then we'll talk about air pollution in India. What is the stage? What is the level of air pollution happening in India? Moving onwards, we will talk about the significance of BS6 regulations to India as we jump from BS4 to BS6 by skipping the 5. Then the preparations that would be needed along with it and the increased complexity with it bring it. Moving onwards, the safety, active safety and passive safety, the types of safety. Lastly, we'll be talking about the recalls and why it is important for the modern vehicles. And then we'll talk about a little bit of procedures and the technical terms and some regulations related to it. So what should be your expectations from this presentation? So the first thing that we would be knowing about is what is BS6 regulations, how are the recalls procedures done, and what are the safety recalls that are prioritized over each and everything, each and every component also. Then we will be talking about how we can achieve the BS6 regulations and the things associated with it. Then again, we will be talking about how can we ensure the safety in BS6. Lastly, we will be talking about how these technologies are affecting and how BS6 can achieve the things which we want. And lastly, there would be the details of the procedures of the safety and the recalls. So what should be your modern vehicle analogy? So we see that in the past few years, there has been been a drastic change in you can say in the field of mobile phones, because now common common smartphone has a number of upgrades like light sensor, GPS sensor, accelerometer, humidity sensor, and all the other types of microphones, etc. But it is for the same in the case of the vehicle. It is not the same in the case of the vehicle modifications, as it includes a lot of parts and a number of hardware upgrades, and it is not easy to have a vehicle recall. It's a very complex procedure. So there are total of around 11,136 electrical parts, 61 ECUs in total, optical bus for high bandwidth infotainment data, and 35 ECUs connected by 3 campuses sharing approximately 2,500 signals and 250 CAN messages. So this should be the modern vehicle analogy which we should follow about. So here you can see the detailed procedure of it, that how each and every component is valuable and how the recall procedure is such a complex process. So now moving onward to the sensors and the actuators. So these are nothing but the indicators, and they are a kind of unsung heroes, you can say, of the modern electronic automobile world. But it works as the eyes, ears, nose, and hands for a vehicle. So each and every part has each and every sensors and actuators associated with it. It indicates different types of functions and different types of indications to the driver. So now I will shift the session to Mr. Krishnakant Korvillari. He will take from here. Thank you, sir. And over to you.
Basic, but we are in the, yeah, I think somebody is recording. Please do that. But in general, it's basically the precise control of fuel, air, and as well as the combustion. And then you can do it with electronics, and then you associate the functionality in the ECUs. Before I jump into the emissions part, I just wanted to look at a very small 2-minute clip. It's about 2 minutes, explaining how the combustion happens in a diesel engine. I hope everybody can listen. I have tested it, but please let me know. But otherwise, there are subtitles for this. So,
Krishna, we are not able to listen to the
okay,
audio.
you are not
Probably
able to listen.
explain,
Okay,
you can explain
I think
while
I can
the
just.
video is going.
I think there is a small issue. Are you able to hear now?
Diesel engine operating
Now
principle.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry,
now
I
it's
will just
perfect.
try to repeat it because it's just 2 minutes.
The general diesel engine operating principles shown apply to diesel cars and pickup trucks as well as heavier duty diesel trucks, which are used in this video for illustrative purposes only. In diesel engines, the operating cycle starts with clean air being drawn into the cylinder, not a fuel-air mixture as in a conventional gasoline engine. The motion of the piston compresses the air, heating it to a high temperature. When the piston nears the top of the cylinder, fuel is injected under high pressure through a number of precisely machined holes in the tip of the fuel injector. The fuel enters the engine in the form of a fine spray, and the surface of each droplet quickly begins to vaporize on its path through the hot air. Spontaneous ignition takes place without the need for a spark, and rapid expansion of the combusting mixture increases the pressure in the cylinder, forcing the piston down and powering the vehicle. When the piston is close to its lowest position, the exhaust valve starts to open, and the exhaust stroke then drives the spent gases out of the combustion chamber, and the cycle starts again. In conventional gasoline engines, a mixture of fuel and air is drawn into the cylinder, compressed by the motion of the piston and ignited by a spark as the piston nears the top of the cylinder. The resulting combustion generates pressure which forces the piston down to power the vehicle.
Yes. So I guess that gives an introduction to how the basic diesel engine works. I don't want to really go through the technical details because it's not our topic, but I just wanted the people to understand that why emissions are part of engines, because it's basically a combustion. When something is burnt, you have certain pollutants. But in the case of engines, it is completely different. We have a lot of hydrocarbons and NOx related emissions and so on. That is because, as you are seeing in the video, the combustion properties are completely different than what you are doing at a normal environment. That means if you just fire something at the outside, you just have some smoke and some things. But combustion inside the cylinder is completely different. The pressure is different, the temperature is different, and everything is different. So there is a chance of forming new type of pollutants, which must be treated before we letting it out. For just to give an example of the BS6, the atmospheric pressure is 1 bar. But when you actually send the fuel inside the combustion chamber, is most of the time when a common rail is used is at least 1800 to 2000 bar plus. That means the fuel is compressed 2000 times, and it's one of the very safety component, because if it's compressed 2000 times, then you can understand the enormous pressure and the fuel properties and everything. So that's why combustion inside the chamber produces a lot of different pollutants compared to what you actually do it outside in the normal environmental conditions. So before I say, I wanted you to relate when I say this. When we say that we wanted to precisely measure why we have so many electronics and particular actuators in the particular automotive domain is now because we want to precisely control it. So when I say for a diesel, how does it ignite is basically it should have the compression ratio, fuel, and air. But previous mechanical system just takes the air as naturally aspirated, but then you have just an approximation. Yeah, and so now if you take in this particular case, without going into the technical details, if I need to know exactly how much amount of air is entering here, what I shall do is that first I should have a filter that just filters it, and then a sensor that measures how much amount of air is coming in. And then I have a compressor. Compressor is basically, is also an efficiency part. Let's say some user pressed the accelerator pedal suddenly to have a highest power. You cannot get the air immediately because it's a naturally aspirated. So this component actually works to give the additional air that actually gives the more power. And then the air is different from the liquid. What I meant is to measure the air. It's not same as what you measure a liquid, because if you have a 1 liter of liquid, you have a standard definition to measure it. But then air is very tangible. That means it should consider the temperature, pressure, because with temperature, density changes and so on. So that's why when we are trying to measure anything precisely, the complexity of the system has grown enormously. And then we have these many components that are shown here, like temperature sensor, coolers, compressors, and so on. That's why the modern vehicles are complex. But of course, it gives the advantage that you are highly efficient, and then you know exactly at what point of time how everything behaves. That gives the complete also follows the safety. So now let's jump into the emission part. So whenever we are actually burning the fuel in the combustion chamber, as I spoke before, just because the temperature conditions, pressure conditions, and so on, stoichiometric ratios and so on are completely different from the normal. So that's why we produce a lot of these NOx, hydrocarbons, and carbon monoxide, and so on. So with the new bar stage 6, there are these regulations that tells you to treat all this before you letting it into the environment. Let's take an example of here DPF, which is a diesel particulate filter. In the bar stage 4, there is no regulation to treat it. That means whichever is actually combusted and the result is thrown out into the atmosphere using a tailpipe. So in the later slides, we'll just talk about how just one particle can create a lot of harmful effects on the health. Let's look at the air pollution in India. Before we draw anything, we must understand we are a country of 1.36 billion people. That means we have a lot of energy demands. So instead of actually narrowing that, okay, this could be the reason, this could be the reason, we should always find out what ways we can improve our infrastructure and also to cater all the needs. As you can see in the picture, at least this is the information from Delhi, is one of the most top 5 polluted cities in the world. And then it says almost 40% of its emission is due to the transport. And you could see on the right side, basically how the combustion produces different types of harmful chemicals or the harmful gases. So these, in turn, I actually personally view it as also a part of safety, but it's not classified as safety because safety is basically immediate. But then these are like kind of slow poison that is coming because of our vehicles into the atmosphere and then influencing our health and causing a lot of harmful things to our bodies. So we'll go a little bit deep into it. What is bar stage 6? So basically bar stage 6 says that if you have a combustion engine, be it a diesel engine or a gasoline engine or whatever it is, if you're combusting any kind of fuel, it has a regulations. What is acceptable level of these pollutants into the atmosphere? So as I said before, in bar stage 4, like there is no exhaust treatment. That means whatever is combusted, you just have a normal catalyst that is oxidating it and then you send everything out. But then now with the new one, we have a lot of treatment happening. And then that means we are actually eliminating most of the time. Like if you take a DPF, most of the current regulation states that you should have a latest DPF, and the efficiency depending on operation is at least 90 to 99%. That means we are eliminating, you can imagine how much of it is now gone with the new regulations. And then some technical details about type approval. That means we are measuring it real time, and OBD is basically you have onboard monitoring of what is the fault and so on. So you don't know, nobody needs to bother about it physically. So you have the software telling us, okay, what is the problem in this vehicle? It will tell it. And then we have fuel infrastructure that needs to be updated. And there is a lot of chemistry happening in the exhaust system to let these harmful things, chemicals, treated into the normal ones. Like H2O is just a water and nitrogen is part of the normal environment. So we are treating most of these combustions now with the new norms, and that means we are actually inhaling safer and safer air. Just to take one example, this is one of the diesel particulate filter that comes as a standard part of installation with the new bar stage 6. But if you look at this particle, what does it is? It's just that you have a combustion and somewhere you have incomplete combustion due to a lot of practical reasons, and then these particles are produced. And the important thing is these particles are so narrow that it's out of order of 10 micrometers, 2.5 micrometers, and 0.1 micrometers, depending on the classification. So these are so narrow that your natural human body cannot really filter it with your lungs or whatsoever. So it can directly enter your bloodstream when you inhale it. And it cannot directly cause a death, but it is actually amplifies it, the process. And also, if you look at, it's a sad reality that if you are actually there in some of the most polluted cities, it's almost equal to spending a day is almost equal to smoking 8 to 10 cigarettes. And you can see that because these particles, when they release directly into air, it can just directly enter into the, when you just inhale it, it goes into your body directly. And because it's so small that nothing in your body can actually filter it. And it can even cause cancer. So when I say you will not really relate to it, the size, let's have a real analogy here. So if you take a human hair, it is at least 50 to 70 micrometers. And if you take a sand, in a beach, fine sand, it's up to 90 micrometers. But the particles that we are talking here is about 2.5 and then 10 micrometers. So now you know how small they are, and they are produced only because of these combustions. So as I spoke before, the new DPF, which is part of these new emission norms, can almost reduce it. So if somebody who are in the campaign field, who are into the part of this IRS, it says, okay, we have new norms and the cost of the vehicle is increased so much and the maintenance has been increased like 20%. You should clearly tell them what is the benefit. I would say it's absolutely beneficial because it creates, these emissions create a lot of problems. Even though they're not directly part of safety, they can cause a lot of health issues. And then the only way that we can avoid them is treat them before you leave it into the atmosphere. So let's come back to the original concept of safety. So from OEM stands for original equipment manufacturer, meaning Volvo or Ashok Leyland, Mahindra, Tata, all these people come as OEMs. So broadly, even though there are multiple places, we call it as active safety and passive safety systems. So basically active safety, as some of the others in the presentations, in the previous presentation has told, it will prevent the accident happening. So you have something like an anti-lock braking system. So just like as I told for an engine system, it has its own set of electronics that senses the information and then actuators that actually works on the basis of the need. So basically what does this ABS give? If you do a hard braking, it still gives the user to maneuver. That means even if you press your brake 100% in terms of panic, still you will be able to control the drivability of your vehicle. So what does this? These technologies will help us to avoid the accident. That means if there is a vehicle nearby and then the driver is somehow due to some reason is not activating the brake, the car can detect it and actually brake itself to a safe distance. So these type of things will avoid, but I have already seen a lot of examples has been given in the previous sessions, so I will not go into the technical details of it too much. But then if you look into the another safety is a passive safety. The previous one just tries to avoid the accident, but then if the accident becomes inevitable, these systems actually help us to save lives. So here, what is the typical ones? Is basically seat belt, child safety seat, airbags, and so on. Then it also, as I explained before, it has its own set of sensors and actuators and the ECU that controls this whole functionality, when to activate it, when is the right time to activate it, and so on. So basically, who are in the campaign field, I don't really want to go too much into the details of these particular technologies because it's already available on the internet as well as has been told in the previous seminars. But I can share just my experience. Way back in 2017, I was working in Bangalore. So in the month of Feb, I just decided to go to home from office every day by cab. So I met 14 different drivers in Bangalore on my way every day going from home. And only 12 of them are wearing seatbelt. When I actually personally asked, they have, some of them just told that they're wearing it because their company mandates it, or there is a police that asks them for fines and so on if you just don't wear the seatbelt. And the sad reality is that 30% of them, they don't have any idea of the seatbelt itself, how it actually helps them saving. Why I said it's a sad is because the cab drivers are most of the time engaged in driving. It's a full-time job for them. When I meant they're not aware of it is that some of them I see that they observe that if you ask how can, one of the driver, I even asked him, how can it actually help me because it's really soft? Then I just asked him, just give a sudden movement, and then he actually gave it and the seatbelt stopped. That means some of the drivers and who are actually not been into so much of formal education and so on, they haven't really got the basics right. That means they think that seatbelt when it moves soft, so they are not really confident that it can save, but they don't really understand that this being designed like that to allow you to move for the soft movement. But in case of a crash, it's never a soft movement, it's a jerk. And in that case, seatbelt always helps you to save your life. And of course, I wanted the people who are into this have some basic idea about this, and please get yourself some awareness so that you can actually explain it to others how it will save the people actually. So now I just want to talk about one more incident that's been happened in May 2013 when a bus was going from Bangalore to Hyderabad. So this bus has hit a culvert while overspeeding a car, and then this was completely burnt. If you look at the FIR summary that's been submitted to the government, it says 44 people are completely. Just a second, sorry. 44 people are completely burned to death, and including infant. Only 5 people are the survivors, and the accident basically happened due to overspeeding. And the government of Andhra Pradesh has to do a DNA sampling because the bodies are so burned that they are so fragile and completely unidentifiable. So I just wanted to ask the participant now, just take a small break. So we have been so much of this safety. So before we go into a technical detailed analysis of vehicle, chassis, roads, and so on, what do you think the basic safety concern as a user? What will you suggest that would have actually helped? I just wanted to know from any of you.
Yeah, good evening,
Oh,
Krishna.
yeah.
This is Vinod here. For me, the education of drivers is a basic concern. As you said in the earlier slide, the cab drivers are not aware about seatbelt. Like that, in India, ABS is compulsory, and in BS6 vehicles, ABS is compulsory. But in maybe 50% of the vehicles, ABS is not working, and drivers doesn't know how to check ABS brake and know how it is function, what is the use of ABS brake. No, they doesn't know about that. So without knowledge, having a equipment is a safety concern for me.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
From my side, I think there should be no unintended behavior by the systems of a vehicle.
Yeah, but in this case, there is no unintended behavior from the vehicle side. There is no real unintended behavior. That means it's never accelerated. It's the driver who requested acceleration, and obviously it succeeded in giving that.
But sometimes we have seen in some vehicles.
Yeah, yes, but I was just referring to this particular case because now I will only go into the basics of it.
In this particular scene, possibly if people were being belted, most of the fatalities could have been avoided. Hello, Krishna, are you there?
Yes, I think it just went off for a second, but is everybody able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are able to see.
Yeah,
So
okay,
I feel
let's.
That if the participants or if the occupants were belted, possibly some of the fatalities could have been avoided.
Yes. So let's look at the reality now. Most of the time, we can think of very high technical engineering when it comes to safety. But if you look in reality, most of the time, if you are just aware of your basic safety precautions, it will help us a lot. A lot is actually very big because in this case, if this primary safety that I highlighted is taken care, there is a report that 90% of the 44 people could have escaped with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So this is always not about a masterpiece of engineering. When Giri also pointed in a particular thing to Sweden, when in Sweden, if you take a driving license, you actually apply 100% brake as a part of license test. That means you always do panic braking, and then you drive the ABS yourself and test yourself ESC, that is this electronic stability program. It's always the experience that actually connects you to the safety part. So in this case of primary safety, the one basic thing is that all these new multi-axle air-conditioned buses is supposed to have glass breakers across the seats. Actually, that means in case of emergency, they should be provisioned to break the glass and jump out of the vehicle. This has not been followed and been made mandatory after this incident in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Mm-hmm. And also it was found that the emergency exit was actually had a few extra seats. Just to accommodate a few extra seats, they have covered the emergency exit, and also there is no proper marking on it. So if in this case of even driver not following the rules and so much technical explanation of the design chassis vehicle, if these two basic things, That means if somebody can break the glass and then there is emergency marking, more than 90%, you can imagine 44 people and 90% can be saved. Then I always wanted the people who attend the safety seminars to connect to the basics. The regulations part, the technical part will be always supported by governments and the OEMs and so on. But most of the time when we are connected to our grounds, we can always have achieve more in terms of safety. Now, when it comes to the rules, the bus is actually exceeding at 110 kilometers and overtaking a car. And also there has been allegations on the geometry of the road, the curvature and the height of the culvert is not as per the National Highway Authority of India. But these are not in our hands. And of course we have regulations and it's in practical real life with thousands of kilometers across the country. There is always a possibility that one place is not as per the rule. So we can kind of take these things further, but it's always the primary that we always had importance to. And when it comes to the vehicle design, the first report also submitted that these particular vehicles used a non-metallic fuel tank and is very close proximity to battery, and the low ground clearance is not suited for Indian roads. This been reported to the government. And then we see that these fire catching incidents are happening quite common. But I just want all our friends and colleagues to keep a note of this primary safety, that what I'm talking here. So now let's jump into our main topic, that is recall. What is a recall? Basically, recall is just calling back the vehicle because it is not in accordance with what is committed either to the government or to the customers, which has been already delivered. That means you have already sold a vehicle, but unfortunately, let's say develops a problem after 500 hours of use or 10,000 hours of traveling and so on, different safety aspects, non-safety aspects and so on. So that we call it as a recall. Now most of the audience has a rough idea of what each system like engine or airbags has a lot of sensors and so on. Why recall is very common, because with 20,000 electronics, it's quite possible that some might have actually not behaving as intended after a certain amount of time due to some reasons or a combination or due to practicality. So recalls is inevitable in modern vehicles, and this is for the whole world. But then how we do it with respect to how better we can handle it is what actually defines safety for us. And with the new BS6, what happens is that all the OEMs are updating this line of vehicles. They're coming with more and more safety features, comfort features, and so on. That means we have now a new set of complex, much more complex vehicles that will be released to road compared to what we have a decade ago. That means naturally the recall rate or the probability percentage is high. But you cannot compare an automotive recall with a safety fix that you receive on your iPhone or something, because here people are directly involved and you cannot actually expect, because you have to know a lot of things, and the real-time operating system that has been embedded into the ECUs doesn't work like a operating phone. Of course, a Tesla is trying something, but it is in the pilot phase. As of now, all the recalls must go through the standard procedure of going to dealer and so on. So if somebody is actually, what is a safety recall? If you see from the Ministry of Road Transport, they are just defining a safety recall is an aspect where either the user or basically the driver or some passenger inside the vehicle or the pedestrian on the road is impacted when certain malfunction happens, be in terms of safety. So they had given some examples like a steering component doesn't work, brake doesn't work, or there is a fuel leakage, or malfunction of seat belts, or a malfunction of airbags, and so on. So these what we call it as a safety recall. So if you look into the history, one of the biggest safety recall is the Takata airbags. So they have recalled millions of vehicles because they had a problem in the way this airbag is operating, that it can cause damage to the user or to the driver or the passenger where it is located. So as of now, how we are doing recall, or at least what is been outlined by the government of India, is that currently the SIAM, or let's say the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturer, deals these recalls. And we will, in the next slide, we will see how in reality the website, how we will try to take a practical example of one car and then how what type of information we have with respect to recall on that and so on. So the government defines the recall procedure like this. A OEM, that means a Volvo or a Tata or a Mahindra, identifies, or some of the supplier to this company has identified a safety risk. So the first thing they will do is a risk assessment based on the failure, severity, controllability, and so on. And they have to conclude whether it's a safety defect or not. So this is completely under the responsibility of the OEM as of now. And there is a nodal agency that is nominated by the central government, which takes the feedback from us. That means who are purchasing the cars or you consumers, and then coordinates with these particular OEMs and or else a CM. So it is up to the manufacturer to first identify and then create a process to evaluate it and then confirm its defect. Once it's been confirmed as a defect, they have to go through the standard procedure of recall. That means inform the dealer network, inform the customers, and then create a timeline, estimate the government on the number of products that include this type of recall, and also maintain this record for 7 years. This has been mandated with the new law. So this is the template that is being given by the government of India for the OEMs when there is a recall. As you could see, it's just the manufacturer and the chassis and vehicle and what is the problem and total vehicles recalled and what is the problem and what action they have taken and when they are planning and when they are planning to announce the campaign and when they are planning to finish it and any other information. So this is what the process currently is. But let's look at the reality. Now, I'll go to a SIAM website and then see how, with respect to the information, how it is. I hope everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, you can see.
So, as I told, currently it is happening voluntarily by SIAM. That means this automotive union is actually handling these recalls. And we don't have a real difference between a safety recall and a normal recall. Let's take one car, BMW. And let's check the year. And we don't need to really enter the model or variant, we can see. Yes. So if you see here, you can see that 10th September 2009 and a model and a variant, total number of recalls targeted and which are manufactured and what is the error. So this is only for information. If you are actually a consumer of a vehicle, your first point of contact is always your dealer. But having this transparency helps a lot, because if I have taken a car that's been used or I am at a certain place where I'm not accessible to the dealer and then so on, I can have an information open if I have an issue with it. But the sad part is we don't have a separate safety. That means if I have to just go through this, I have a lot of information that is associated with this. And if you look at one of the advanced country like the US, let's see how it is. This is NHTSA, which is the United States Department of Transportation. So what they do for recall is that they have a unique vehicle identification number. Of course, we also have it. It doesn't mean it's just specific to US, but it's just that the current system, what we have in India, we don't really has implemented yet the database based on the vehicle identification number. So we can just check this particular chassis here or the vehicle identification number. Okay, it asks me something. So if you take the US, it's quite simple actually. So you take just one particular vehicle identification number. Vehicle identification number in terms of relevance is just like an Aadhaar to us. So each vehicle will have a unique identification number, and then you can just enter it and you know if there are any recalls. You don't need to go through all the hassle that what we have currently, that you need to, if you are just a consumer who doesn't have any idea of automotive, still it is quite useful because you just enter your vehicle number and then you have just no recalls is actually applicable for you. And then we will take one example where there are recalls. see, if I enter this, I just have 3 unrepaid recalls. So what I would actually expect as an improvement to what we are currently standing is this set of guidelines that I will be really happy to see. What I meant is a single shot of safety information to the consumer is always beneficial. That means if I, as a consumer, has bought a bar stage 6 or any of the latest vehicle, and at any point of time, of course, the dealer is the first contact. But if I have a central site, I can just enter and know yes or no. That's it. I don't really need to go through any of these, going through the information, because not all people will be capable of handling such information. So that will be really good. And then the reachability of this nodal agency is presently is a bit unclear. So we don't really know how the normal consumer can complain. Probably it will be a little better if it's more accessible. And then at the moment, the government hasn't really mentioned the mandatory details that needs to be sent to the customers as well, because it's completely under the responsibility of OEM. That means the company decides what is what. And also, once a recall is done, I didn't find anything that will ensure its completeness or effectiveness. That's been, of course, this doesn't mean we are actually we don't trust our own CM, but it always brings more accountability, more transparency, where we can achieve more results actually. And then if OEM is doing performing more and more safety recalls, there should be some actions actually, which I would like to see or think that this will help the overall safety. And also, it is good if the government suggests them to go for first party insurance rather than third party for handling this whole amount of money, because recall is a big process, because you have to inform the dealer network and all the users must be brought back to the station. And if it's a software, it's a software. And if it's a component, like some particular part, they need to fix the new part and then make sure that everything works and then send it back. And all this has to happen free of cost. So when it comes to safety or an accident, what is the first and second thing? Is always the first thing is always about the life, and the second thing is always about the money. How are we going to do it? So it's always good if these policies can be a little bit more better in future, because it's just been drafted. So I wish that we will be better in future than what we are today. And I think now most of the users have an idea how the bar stage 6 or how the complex systems are helping in terms of safety, and what we as a user should know or concentrate, and what is the process for recall and what the government is doing, what could be better. So with this, I will conclude my presentation, and would be really nice to discuss some questions.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Krishna. It was really a very good overview about the recall. And in fact, I had really understood how the engine works. I think it was my the master sessions in IT sitting and looking at the engine, how the exhaust works and what are the emissions and stuff like that. And I also saw a lot of comments coming in that even non-technical guys understood the presentation much better. So that's really great.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Can you come on screen? Stop sharing
Yes.
the presentation.
Yes.
So that we will just take, we have another 30 minutes right now.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I will also give you a little bit of updates on certain aspects of recalls from my experiences. And we also have experienced participants and also noble researchers. For example, I can see Joseph Kanidra sir, I can see Ivy Rao sir here, who has very well experienced in the CIAM community and stuff like that. So we will also pull in these people for now and then. From the engine recall per se, it was very clearly understood. I would also like to give the largest recalls in the globe is like, there are many companies, I do not want to name the companies, every other company's recalls like 9 million, 7 million, the cost is like $1 billion. So recall is the last thing every OEM has to go through. So one example, when I was working with one of the Japanese OEM, I think way back 2015 or sometime, the airbag suddenly deployed. And there was a question from the customer saying that you have to take the recall thing. But we were also wondering was the recall, is there any standardized procedure to do a recall? Because the concept was very simple. Here, what happened was the person was driving a vehicle at say at 100, 120 kilometers per hour, and suddenly made a U-turn. Yeah. But this was not in the test case for us to really test whether the airbag has to deploy or not deploy. So this was missed. Not a sane person will definitely drive a car at 120, 130 kph and then take a U-turn. Yeah. So in this context, airbag deployed. So there was a lot of questions for us whether we have to get into and inform the OEM, or do we need to add this point in the test case? Do we need to fine tune our algorithms and stuff like that? So I would like to understand from you, is there any standard protocol that, yes, this is a problem, this has to be fixed only by recall? What is a standard method to gauge this? So Krishna, the question is for you. Able to hear me?
Yeah, I just thought, okay, okay, I just thought you were addressing to others actually. I think when it comes to recall as a user, I think the entire responsibility sits with OEM, because they are the one legally selling it. So they must be the first point of contact to report it. So in the case, as I told, we have this nodal agency being set by the central government of India also. So we can bring it to the notice. So as I explained in the presentation, it's the OEM that should perform this risk analysis and the confirmation of this part. As a user, as a consumer, we just bring it to the notice. And of course, we will say that this is a big concern. And if the OEM doesn't think it's a big concern, then we have our government and agency to update why we think it is. But it is the OEM that has to take the decision, because they are the whole responsible for the product.
Okay, understood. OEMs are the most responsible person, and they will be the torchbearer for the recalls and bear all the cost. I hope it does not come back to the customers.
Yes,
my next question
recalls
to you,
safety. Just one point. Safety recalls are mandated by the government of India to be done free of cost. So this must be the information that all the consumers should be aware of, because you bought a vehicle at certain price thinking that everything works. If something doesn't work, legally you are not the person to be paying for that.
Okay, that's good. I have another question. I think there are a lot of questions just popping on the chat window. So I will just read out the question. Excuse me if I don't read your names. Why is it not mandatory for manufacturers to impart about the specific features provided for the safety, which may turn deadly in the absence? End users are freshers to this concern. Is there any checklist done for this?
The usual standard says it, but because I just wanted the person to little bit explain what safety features can turn deadly actually, because safety feature is intended for the to save your life in case of an unforeseen event. But it is up to the consumers to be aware of technologies. And of course, in this case, OEMs can play a little bit of an active role by telling them or informing them about the consumers when they're buying with the user sessions of how and why, and the basic of this presentation. Okay, if you have ABS or if you have this system, how does it work and how does it can help? So in this question, I cannot really answer because I don't really understand what part of a safety function can create a harm actually.
Okay. So another question is, like there are recalls happening everywhere, even in India. Recently, we saw around 44,000 new diesel cars has been recalled. Also, we all read one of the largest manufacturers in Europe did some modifications in the algorithm, especially in the favorite field of yours, which you explained a little bit. I do not want to get into what exactly they did, but can you just briefly tell us what happened without naming an OEM? And explain how this could have been avoided, or if it would have been flashed in the production line or the series production, then millions of cars would have been out with this faulty intended malpractice or intended things of algorithm changes which they did for an engine to gain whatever the standards that the government or the federal is imposing. out of your interest, can you just brief this concept so
Yes.
that our audience can also understand the intensity
Yeah.
of the recalls?
Yes. So this is one of the biggest engine recalls in the history of automotive, and they are one of the biggest group in Europe, having their almost access to every part of the world. They are selling vehicles in almost all parts of the world. So what they have done is that, as I told, the BS6 or the Euro 6 accordingly in Europe is a very stringent emission norm. That means it will tell you exactly what is the acceptable level of hydrocarbons or the NOx or the particles that should come out of the tailpipe, depending on the operation of the engine. So what they have done is that they have, and how this automotive thing comes into the reality is that every government, whichever the country you have a type approval agency that defines how this has to be tested. And then they check this particular one, and when they see that, okay, this is following the rules, that means it is actually giving only the DPF or the particles or the hydrocarbons or the NOx emissions as per what is specified, then they give approval to this. That means they are eligible to sell the vehicle in that particular country. So what this company has done is that they actually has created a software that will detect if the vehicle is on the real road or if it is being tested at the testing agency. So
Okay.
what happening is they have all the technology they need, but still what they did is they just tried to fool the agency by doing everything correctly when it is tested for type approval, but on the road they didn't follow any of the norms. And why it is? Because it is expensive, as I mentioned, the cost, because you, like, let's consider you just have an empty tailpipe, and now you have particulate filter, oxidation catalysts, and then SCR systems, injectors, urea, a lot of phenomenon happening just to avoid this pollution. They just avoided it. They wanted more sales at a less maintenance cost, and it's one of the biggest thing. But luckily now, because of that fraud, the new emission norms has been updated. So as I mentioned in my BS6 presentation there, we have PEMS, portable real-time equipment measurement. So what we are doing is we're not now just going to laboratory, run the car, check it. We're gonna run the car on the road and then fix these devices to the real tailpipe and see if everything is correct or not. So I don't really see always mistake is bad, because it's because of the mistakes we try to make improvement. And then in this case, the regulation board is no longer trusting something, taking in a room and then testing it and doing it. So now we have PEMS that will take care of this type of faulty behaviors or so on, whatever you call it.
Exactly. Just to add from the safety perspective, because I've been involved in various NCAP tests, new car assessment program. As you said, it is not done in a closed room. Whenever they pick up a car from the dealer and directly take it to the crash test center, and they invite the OEMs who manufactured it, the suppliers who manufactured the sensors, also the suppliers who gave the safety systems, and they all inform that on this date, on this time, we are going to crash this car. And you can come and say what exactly has to be done. And the car which was built by the OEM is crashed in front of them, and they record it, and it has been shared with them to avoid the further recalls and stuff like that. So that's important. So the next question we got is, do India maintain crash database like USA? We have FARS, NHTSA, etc. Even individual states maintain their own crash database in the US. So little bit, do you have some information about the crash database? If yes,
Unfortunately not. I probably
okay.
somebody can take up this.
I think I can also give you a little bit of insight on crash database, since currently we do not have any specific crash database in India which talks about the recording of accidents. As we know, the government of India. So in India, you have to understand one system, that we do not have a specific nodal agency which talk only about the crashes. Okay, in crashes, it's been collected as per the police, traffic police. And the only way that the police records is to identify who is at the fault. Okay, so in various experiment in the seminars, I already told the larger vehicle will always be under the fault in India. If you look at the databases, they will say, okay, if a car hits a truck is at the fault. If a motorcycle hits a car, and the car is at the fault. If a bicycle hits a motorcycle, the motorcycle is at the fault. Okay, but that's not really true, because there are various intricacies followed in the crash. things. And right now we do not have a publicly open database, but one database I can say that road accident sampling system, rassi.org, you can just get into this website and see. This is one of the team which collects the accidents with around 5,000 accidents in the database, which has a very detailed information about what happened, and all the names and the personal details are anonymized. It's only for the engineering analysis, and you can just go through this. This is only one database which you have. From India, if you can just ask me that the Ministry of Road Transport releases a report called Road Accidents and Deaths every year, and 2019 was recently released directly from Transport and Research Wing. This is around 150 pages report, which has all the states, all the cities data, and also all the developments what the government of India is doing. So this is about the crash database. And let me just look at a few other questions which is coming in. Okay, so I would like to bring in a couple of participants on the forum to just share some thoughts on the recalls. I think, can we hear something from Joseph, sir? Would you like to share something, sir?
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
To have you here.
The success in US with regard to safety recall, it is not by accident. If you look at our Code of Federal Regulations in the United States, under Section 554, it is very clearly defined what should be done with regard to safety investigations for recalls, compliance of the standards. We test for all of these things. But the defects, particularly, we have been very successful for over 50 years in making recalls, compulsorily because it is provided for under the law. But complaints originates with consumers mostly, or from the accident data itself, because we collect accident data. We have collected for more than 50 years, and we thoroughly analyze when we see a case to see what all problems are related to that crash. So it is a concerted effort, but certainly we have been very successful in getting recalls done. Manufacturers are required by law, if the agency informs them there is a proven defect, they can conduct their own investigations. We will provide evidence. And
thank you very much, sir. Can others please mute them? I would like to ask Mr. Ivy Rao, sir, if he is there, he can share some thoughts, because he has been extensive. He had worked extensively with SIAM. Some few insights about how recalls was handled inside SIAM in India.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Though actually the recall policy has been mandated very recently, manufacturers have been recalling vehicles whenever they found any problem with the vehicles which are already in the market. As far as Maruti is concerned, I think first recall was done sometime in the early 90s on Zen, when Maruti found there is some problem with the pinion material used. So they had to recall a big number of Zens to rectify the vehicle with modified steering system. I think if you look back in last 15 years, I think a lot of manufacturers have recalled vehicles whenever they found any problem with their vehicle, which is already in the market. And it was Automobile Manufacturers Association which has took initiative to actually come out with a recall policy, which was actually being monitored by SIAM, as Mr. Krishna also mentioned. And only after that, the government has come out with a official mandatory recall policy. With whatever experience I had in Maruti, one of the major problems the manufacturer faces is to trace the vehicles which are in the market. After analyzing the problem, I mean, the manufacturers identify what is the range of chassis number which would have got affected with the defective part. Then when you write to the customers to trace uh, the customers for getting the vehicle back for rectification, the success rate is not very good. This is one major, because in India, I think people change vehicles very fast, and the registration doesn't get changed as fast as the vehicles change the owners. So this is one of the major issues being faced by the manufacturers in tracing the defective vehicles. Otherwise, I think, automotive industry manufacturers are conscious of their responsibility, and they had taken prompt action to recall vehicles whenever they had any problem on the vehicle which was already in the market.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. So that means we heard from the veteran from the auto industry clearly explaining that OEM takes up the responsibility and it will just not leave as
I
it
think
is.
there's no confusion on that issue.
Exactly.
The only
Exactly.
problem is sometimes a small problem in the market. People say that it's a design defect and it should be recalled. But I mean, the manufacturer on detailed analysis would identify what is the problem, and if he confirms that it's not a design problem or a problem which calls for recall, generally customer reactions are different, and that gets into debate actually. One of the good examples you have mentioned is about airbag. Airbag deployment also has been a big problem, and customers always feel that something should have happened which has not happened, and there's a lot of analysis, and it's very difficult to convince a customer about, especially with the airbags, because whatever you say, they say that we are trying to protect ourselves and not really giving importance to the safety.
Right. Airbag is a very tricky subject, because if you have a side pole crash with 10% offset, airbag will not deploy, but still customer wants the airbag to be deployed.
That's right. Exactly.
Which is very difficult for us to explain them in detail. Okay, one question which I wanted to understand, and also many people wanted to understand, when do you decide there is a problem in the vehicle and then you need to go for a recall? Is there any benchmark, or is there any standard, or is it okay, OEM decides at what point they decide? I think anybody or even Krishna can answer this. They work on the details.
I think I will talk after some colleagues from OEMs are there. Probably they can give better answer. I will talk in the end.
I mean, I would like to respond. A very first problem coming from the market about any market as a market feedback, the problem is analyzed, and the main issue which OEM would be concerned would be whether it's a design problem or a manufacturing defect, and then whether it's a freak case. So after this analysis, I mean, if the problem is repeating, then they really get into depth to understand exactly whether the part was defective because of manufacturing, and then accordingly decide about the recall.
Okay. Krishna, your part, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I think as he pointed already, one of it is market feedback. As you already spoke about Takata, most of the OEMs doesn't produce all the parts. There are suppliers, and some of the suppliers like Bosch or a lot of suppliers are worldwide. That means most of the times the parts that you are using is not dedicated only produced in India, especially I'm talking about safety and other parts. So sometimes even in the other market, they have a certain information, or let's say some accident has happened and then the airbag hasn't opened. And then this will be the primary point where the manufacturer is aware that there is some issue. And then sometimes the suppliers themselves inform, okay, this is what are the OEMs that this part is being used, and then they come back and to the OEM and update themselves. Okay, see, you are using my part and it seems to have a safety aspect or something. But then it's still the investigation report is liable by OEM. That means together with the supplier, he can conduct a thorough investigation and come back with what is the finding, what is the probability of this failure, and so on, the technical data accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So now let me wear a hat of a customer that I am going to buy a car. Okay. So in this scenario, I always wanted a safe car. I do not want to go for a car or any vehicle for that matter, which has been recalled or the error has been fixed. So now, yeah, I was just going through the Google Forms to just check what is the amount of loss that is incurred, especially with the example which you were quoting about the Takata airbags. It was almost like hundreds and thousands of cars has been recalled, and in some cases 7 million cars in one of the reports, and which incurs to loss of approximately around 50 to 100 billion dollars, which is a huge amount for the deal with such kind of an enormous amount of the loss. Now my question from the economics per se, how do you cover up this cost? Do we put back to the consumers in various other forms, in other variants, or how are you going to cover up this? This question is open for any of the participants who has experience in this, just to share your information. No one would like to answer the lost questions.
Okay. It looks like nobody wants to answer it. In the end,
the answer. Okay.
In the end, it boils down to money.
Okay.
But most of the government across the world mandates that if it's a recall, especially safety recall, the money has to be paid completely by the OEM, and in case of an intentional fraud, like that means the OEM or the supplier already aware that this is a faulty product and still sold it to the consumers, then they'll have a huge fines, like in the case of this emission fraud by one of the famous company. So it will be huge. So definitely it will impact. So we have to separate two parts in financial aspect. One is the cost of recall, this part, and then the fine levied by the government for doing a malpractice. So the cost of recall, as I told in the presentation, is this insurance thing, third party insurance, first party insurance, and so on. They also have a lot of what you call economic dealing, which I'm not completely sure because it's a little more complex. But when it comes to the fine, it definitely affects the OEM, and it could be sometimes if the OEM has to close because there is a huge amount of fine. And usually in automotive, we are not yet at that level, but it is very commonly seen in aviation industry. If you have just one or two faults that has been considered as a malpractice, then you are out of business.
Okay. I think a few questions before we wrap up. Now we all say that OEM will take the responsibility, and also the car manufacturers will take up the responsibility for the recalls, and they fix the problem. And we do not know what problems is going to come, because you say you have thousands of parts in a vehicle. Any sensor may go fault at any point of time after certain thing, because we do not have the capacity to test all the fatigue cycles which the vehicles go through, or whatever standard test procedures. Is there any way or the thought process that we can think of, or maybe today, as of my knowledge, there is no standard exists for a recall, because recall is a particular problem, and we define the problem, the OEM takes up the full ownership with their two heart, and they solve the problem, they fix it. And the government is looking after it. Okay. Is there any way that the government or the independent body or the CIAM body or NSTSA or any of the nodal agency makes once the recall has been identified, irrespective of what is a problem, could be a small nut and bolt problem, could be a complex airbag undeployment problem. Is there any standardization possible? Because I don't know. Is there any standardization possible for such kind of a recall? And we follow step A, B, C, D, and this has to be followed irrespective of whatever the intensity of the recall is. Can this be suggested to the government? Because in this forum, we have a lot of people with multi-stakeholders, we can suggest that this should be the direction for India to work towards the standard procedures of recall to ensure the safety of the occupants who are driving the car, who value the OEMs the most, and or who are inside the cars to save their lives. And this question is open again to Krishna and to all the literates who can just pour in their thoughts.
May I comment on what we are doing in the United States? We have many different levels of safety concerns or whatever other concerns due to defects.
Okay.
Safety is our primary focus. We have a whole office of defect investigations set up for this. Any complaint comes from anywhere or from our own accident data are passed on to that group. Their first responsibility is to immediately let the manufacturer know that we are undertaking the investigation.
Okay.
So we are open about it, inform the manufacturers about it, but simultaneously they can also look into it. So we have that office that does it. For example, if it is a door latch problem, that is a very minor problem when compared to airbag or something else. So they decide which one needs more attention immediately and chase that, and then determines what that problem is. And the manufacturers are invited to participate in our effort and show what we found. And by law, they are required to immediately attend to it. Otherwise, there are hefty fines for it under the law. And they are very cooperative. We never had a problem. One or two cases are there in the 50 years, which went to the court, which was decided in favor of NHTSA. So there's a very well-defined process we go through. And the agency determines which should be more important. For example, if it's a life-saving issue, that must be attended to immediately. A nut bolt issue can wait, but that also is recalled eventually or corrected. Also, we conduct enforcement of the standards. So standard testing is done with vehicles bought from the market, in the open market, and we test them, whether they comply or not. If you find a non-compliant vehicle, that also, immediately has to be attended to by the manufacturers. They have to actually stop selling it and recall every one of them they have already sold if it is non-compliant. But that is very, very rare. It never happens. But it is on the books.
Yes.
So we are very strict about it, and we have a safety record of 50 years. NHTSA really does a good job. I've spent a whole career of 33 years in that agency, of course, in the research and testing side.
Yes, sir. I know you actually. We met in Masti Safe Road, so that's why I could remember you and quickly ask the question. The valuable resource person.
Delhi conference.
Yes,
Yeah.
Delhi conference.
Yes, sir.
So I was a co-speaker.
Yeah.
So I would
I'm a
request
retired man.
IRSC to.
I just dialed into you because I saw this topic coming up, so I thought I'll listen.
It's my honor. Thank you. So I would request IRSC to please invite Joseph sir for the upcoming session. He is the valuable chest of information of NHTSA for 30 years, 3 decades, which is one of the important things. Okay, coming back to this, any other final remark points from the participants? Ivy sir, you would like to add a couple of things?
One other thing I want to point out also is in many instances, the manufacturers themselves in the United States, it is very common. When they find a problem, they immediately jump up and inform all their customers, such and such a vehicle has this problem, we are taking care of it. So they are open about it. So the agency don't have to even chase it.
Perfect.
It is taken care of by the manufacturers very faithfully. That has been our experience. In fact, right now, my own vehicle, which is just 2 years old, I just got a letter from the manufacturers themselves. This engine might stop while you are driving. So we are attending to it. So don't run to the agency to complain.
So I should definitely thank Krishna for giving us this thoughtful, provocative session, talking about recalls and also dwelling much about what it is, because we keep reading that so many billion-dollar loss because of XYZ recall. All the participants who are here today understood what does this recall name means literally, and it was so simple, the information and the explanation what you gave. And I hope it reached all the participants. And we also post this a video recorded on YouTube. And please do comment us. If you have any further questions, do contact IRSC team so that our valuable experts will directly suggest on the things. And a few closing remarks from Krishna, and over to you.
I also thank everybody, and I think especially people attending from US and contributing their knowledge, because I only have one message. When we are into the campaign of safety, the first thing is being aware what is safety and what we can do, first of all, as a simple terms. Because when we feel connected to safety and how that is actually will help you to say, we can explain it to others in a way that is understandable. And I hope we, India or we together, will achieve a good standard, both in terms of vehicle safety and its procedures. And I thank all the work you guys have done till now. It's a really great initiative, and we need such initiative to create awareness, because India is quite diverse. Because before we say, okay, this is not so great, this is not so good, we have to see what we have done really to improve the awareness. And that we can do it by being as simple as possible, so that it reaches, the message is reached and understood by everybody. If they understood and they feel connected to it, they can explain it to everybody around them. And that is the reason I presented a lot of background before I just come and jump into the recall, because I wanted all the participants, even who has no knowledge of automotive, can relate to it completely. And I thank everybody just for attending it, and also inviting me to share my ideas and opinions. Thank you so much.
Sir, where are you from? Sir, where are you from, sir?
I am from, basically, I am from Hyderabad. I have done my bachelor's there, and yeah, as explained, then I started
right?
with Bosch. Sorry?
Are you from Uspania University?
No. I'm from a college named BSIT.
We would also share Mr. Krishna's bio and CV on the
thank you.
on the session, and also we will also share his contacts. If you have furthermore questions, I know 1 hour is not enough to tap the valuable chest of information, so you can directly connect them. Thank you for IRSC for participating, giving me this opportunity after almost 8 months break to host the session. So hope I will be there, and also for the upcoming session. And all the participants, I request you to join us for the next upcoming session next Sunday at same time at 4 p.m. Indian time. And thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant evening for Indians, and afternoon for European, and also good night for US team. And
Good morning.
take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.